to pray that they are free from suffering too, you're going to find something that you're good at. You're going to find something that you're good at because you're going to get that early feedback success loop. What does that look like? Okay, well, if you're able to give of your time to knit a scarf and someone is cold and they have a scarf, you just discovered that is valuable to someone else. You could build a whole business around knitting scarves. Seriously.
Welcome to the Susan Sly Project, where entrepreneurs rule, startups launch, and the side hustle becomes the main hustle. Ladies and gentlemen, your host, Susan Sly.
Well, hey, everyone. I just wanted to give you a shout out wherever you are, whatever you're doing. We're in 101 countries. So, just being here. And I want to thank you all so much for the amazing 5-star reviews that you're leaving on iTunes. And just know, if you are watching on YouTube, I'm the one responding to you. So be nice. No, just kidding. You're always nice, but I'm the one responding to all those comments. So drop a comment, make sure you are subscribing. And as we go into this episode, I want to ask you all a question. What is it you need right now in order to stay the course? What is it you need right now in order to stay the course? Because I can promise you, it might be a little bit of skills, maybe it's some resources, but at the end of the day, it truly comes down to what's in your heart and what's in your mind. So my guest today is absolutely amazing. He is a servant leader. He is the host of The Age of Authenticity, which is a top podcast. He is a 3-time tech company founder. He leads a 12-step recovery group. He's an Ironman 70.3 finisher, and he hails from Irvine, California. Most importantly, though, he's on a mission to help 100 million people break out of isolation and into acceptance. So Christopher Decker, thanks so much for being here.
Susan, it's definitely a pleasure. And thank you for the introduction.
Chris, I want to ask you, right off the bat, there are people listening right now who, whether it's the pandemic, whether it is, I had one of our viewers message me. She lives in Africa and she's like, people are dying here. No one's talking about it. She's trying to start a business. What's the first tip you want to give to someone who's going through a really difficult time and they're wondering if they should give up on their dreams?
If you're going through a really difficult time right now and you're wondering if you should give up on your dreams, you're praying for a miracle. I have a small piece of advice, is to be a miracle to someone else first, is to flip that prayer to pray for others and to meet their needs in whatever way that you can. In that instant, if you can give something, give it. If it's your last loaf of bread, share half of it with someone else. And that will start a chain reaction of unlocking your heart, unlocking more potential in the deepest valleys when it hurts the most. I think that's when it's the most important time to give.
That's so beautiful. It's amazing you mentioned that, Chris, because this summer, the past summer or so, peak of the pandemic, and our family was watching church, right? And Joel Osteen said that if we want something for ourselves, we first have to pray it for others. And what I'm hearing you say is, if we want more abundance, if we want more favor, if we want accelerated blessings, if we want to turn things around, we must first figure out a way to be a blessing to someone else.
Absolutely. We must first figure out a way to be a blessing to someone else. And therein lies the business opportunity. Now, here's a very interesting piece. Have you ever walked into a church and you're looking around and you say, this looks kind of like a business. This kind of feels like a business. Flip that around. Have you ever walked into a company and said, this looks kind of like a church? If you're leading from that area of service, to find something that you can deliver a service to, deliver a piece of value, deliver a giving value to someone else, to pray for someone else's well-being, to pray that they are free from suffering too, you're going to find something that you're good at. You're going to find something that you're good at because you're going to get that early feedback success loop. What does that look like? Okay, well, if you're able to give of your time to knit a scarf and someone is cold and they have a scarf, you just discovered that that is valuable to someone else. You could build a whole business around knitting scarves. Seriously. The same thing could be true for 100 different other topics.
It's interesting you mentioned that, because a lot of times, I see people in business who they start a business and they get that entrepreneurial ADD, right? And they might stick with something for a couple weeks, maybe a couple months, maybe a couple years at the most, and then they're already on to the next thing. One of the things that you really are world class in is helping people release their addictions. And I'd love to talk about that. In all of the hundreds of people that I've interviewed, we've never had this conversation about the people out there who literally go from one thing to the next thing to the next thing. Would you say that's an addiction?
Absolutely. It's an addiction to variety. It's an addiction to um, to to not staying the course with something. And I really believe, Susan, that this boils down to identity. And I'm going to ask you, who does God say that you are? Who does God say that you are? And how far from that truth are your current thoughts and beliefs? If you're way out here 1,000 miles away, well, it's not God that moved, it was you that moved away. So here's where it gets interesting. Is I see a lot of people, they'll focus on the outcome. They say, I want 1 million followers or $1 million. Now, in order to get to that outcome, you could try so many different things. You'll keep beating your head against the wall, trying to get to that outcome. If you're only driven by that outcome, you may never end up achieving it. Why? Because of the processes and the habits and the behaviors that lead to that result are a direct program of the identity, what you actually believe about yourself. So if you think that you're a failure, you'll never succeed, you're destined to keep going on this loop of failure, that's what's going to happen. There is no way that you're going to stumble into that 1 million followers. Or $1 million. It's not going to happen. At that core, then you should focus on the identity. I remember the exact moment that I stopped drinking alcohol. It was the weekend I was serving at a Tony Robbins Unleash the Power Within event as a crew member. There was 15,000 people in the Los Angeles Convention Center. And I'll keep a long story short. When people are coming back from this single activity of walking over a 30-foot lane of hot burning coals, if you go look it up on YouTube, you can see Oprah Winfrey doing this. Yes, Oprah walked over hot coals. The state that you have to get into physiologically, in your mind, in your whole body, in order to do that, requires a lot of faith. It requires a lot inside of you that you didn't even know that you had. So I'm serving at this event and I'm standing there in the doorway, the only way back into the convention center after people had done the firewalk. And the first people started running toward me. They're making noises you could never imagine a human being could ever make. And they're running straight toward. I don't know how I ended up in the middle of all this, but I was. And in that second, I just kind of heard this voice, which was, be a tree, stay firmly rooted. And I stood there and people would run up to me, grab me, cry, hug. I could start to see what other people needed in that moment. We're talking about 15,000 people came through that door. And Susan, this was a high spiritual plane that I'd never experienced with any drug, any amount of drinking. No matter how much money I could spend at a strip club, or nothing was at this height of realizing my purpose on this planet to be a tree and rooted for others. It was so crystal clear in that moment. Now, fast forward to the end of the weekend, Sunday night, when all the crew members are getting together for some drinks. I remember ordering a double Jameson on the rocks, and just out of habit, right? The bartender comes up to me, spills a little bit on me. I smell this. I look at it. I see some of my new friends coming through the front door. And in this moment, Susan, I had this just deep realization. This is not who I am.
Mm-hmm.
This is not who I am. There was an identity change. The identity of who I was changed. And I've gotten really good at helping others accelerate that process. Is if I can show you what God says about you and help you start to believe that, everything else will just start to fall off. Maybe first it starts with money. Are you overspending? Maybe some of your failures as an entrepreneur are not being able to balance the company checkbook. Are you being a responsible steward with the investors' funds? Are you being a responsible steward with your customers' funds? I know I wasn't. That's why I got sued. It might be an issue of needing to stop the drinking. Are you showing up hungover in front of your team every single day? Are you celebrating that as a company culture? Maybe it's weed, maybe it's porn, maybe it's all these list of vices. And you know what? I'll also say that Ironman training for me was an addiction too, because I was trading that for time with my family, time with other things. Everything else was hurting just so I could cross that finish line and get a medal. And what happened after that happened, it threw me into a bit of a state of depression.
Yeah.
Which is something I don't think they talk about enough amongst triathletes, is what happens once you actually
Cross the finish line,
cross
right?
the finish line, something that you just spent 2 years training for.
Mm-hmm.
You lose a lot of that purpose. And if there's nothing guiding you beyond just that applause or that external, it's gonna burn out. Even Shaun White talks about this. Gold medal after gold medal, it doesn't really mean much.
Yeah.
I've gone on a long rant.
No,
Sorry about that.
it's all good. When people are chasing, and I know, and to be a professional triathlete, it was an addiction, right? And one of my things that I've always said is we're all addicted to something. The question is, what are we channeling those addictions into? And what year was LA?
That was 2019. March of
I was there.
2019. You were
I was
there?
there. Yes. So my in our family,
You probably came right. You're probably one of those people that came by me.
yes. So in our family, we I've done speaking events with Tony on large stages, Las Vegas, 20,000 people. I'm friends with Tony's son, Jarek. And so in our family, so many countries and cultures have beautiful rituals for a child to come of age. So in our family, what I do with my kids is, before COVID, when Tony did walk the fire, I would take them to unleash the power within, and they'd walk the fire.
Oh, that's awesome.
And so it was my daughter, Rachel's turn. And so we were in LA, and she walked the fire. And so, yes, I might have been one of those people, just running and celebrating on that Thursday night. I think that one of the interesting things about Tony, just to digress for a moment, a quick story. So we were in, oh, good golly, it's like all the events blend together of my career, but I think we're in Las Vegas, and Tony was on stage, and I just got this knowing, that he's going to declare himself a Christian in front of 20,000 people.
Oh, wow.
And I had a friend of mine messaging me, and he was like, I don't align with Tony's values, and he's a Christian, he swears and everything. And I was like, dude, chill, God uses people, like he just uses people. And literally he's going to declare himself a Christian within 5 minutes. He's like, I was going to go into politics, I was going to do this, and I was going to do this, and F-bomb. And then he goes, but I'm actually a Christian. And what I'm likely going to spend the rest of my career doing is ministry. And the reason I share that, and thank you for bearing your soul and your heart, is one of the things I see so often is, to your point, is we have a calling. It's given to each and every one of us. And I know not everyone listening is a believer, right? But at the end of the day, you got to believe in something. And we all have a calling. And the question is, are we living into that calling? If you look at, anyone who's ever achieved anything, it was really about staying the course, as hard as it was, as tempting as it was to go out and have the drinks or do the drugs or whatever it was. They put their head down and they stayed the course. I want to ask you, you've founded 3 tech companies, and for the guests, I always have guests, they're either founders or they're people who specialize in, one of many things I already appreciate about you is you specialize in that mindset, right? And because you've got to have the right mindset to be successful. Tell us about the companies.
Awesome. In college, I was a participant in something called a hackathon. So I would go to these hackathons at different universities, whether that was UCLA or UC Berkeley. In this case, I found myself at UC Irvine. Now, what a hackathon is, it was really appealing to me because for 72 hours, they would feed me free pizza. I was poor, so I got free pizza. They would give me free t-shirts, and I could meet with any of the companies that could become my clients or could potentially hire me or buy whatever idea I'd come up with. Now, I was like the E and the A of like Michael Gerber E-Myth when I would walk into these hackathons. I would have the idea ready to go. I'd be able to design it, and I was a natural team leader. I would just kind of rally the developers and anybody else I needed in order to make these things happen. I loved going to hackathons because we could stay overly adrenalized. I loved just drinking the Red Bull and being in that flow state of writing some code and having the headphones over my ears. Now that's a hackathon. To me, it was paradise. UC Irvine. At the time, my living situation was not there. I wasn't sure if I was going to be homeless, what was going to happen, but I had this hackathon to go to. I had my car, I had the hackathon. So I went to the hackathon. We get together, lo and behold, it wasn't actually held at the university. They held it at a co-working space that was off campus, actually a block away from where I am right now. And we built a messaging app that sends messages slower, and I won't go into more detail about that, but we wanted to create a virtual pen pal experience. We didn't want people to get email instantly. It wasn't the world's best idea, but I was invited to come build that company at the co-working space during the summer. I'm thinking, wow, this is my opportunity. So I go. Initially, I actually started to help one of the other teams, which was building games for the Oculus Rift before it was cool. This was the first development kit for the Oculus Rift. It was insanely cool. And so I spent the entire summer there. I lived out there. I drank their coffee. It was, they had a dojo downstairs. They had mats for teaching Taekwondo. And so I would work out of this place, live out of this place. It was my home. One day a gentleman walks in. He introduces himself as an investor, as a founder. At this time, I was effectively volunteering my time for all these other things. I was able to freelance, make a little bit of money. But here he walks in, he tells me about his idea. He's building a competitor to Kickstarter. He wants to build a crowdfunding app. And so I just volunteer my time. He's feeding me. I'm coding for him. I'm designing for him. He's buying pizza, cookies, whatever. And then one day he offers me $500 a week to come join him. And I dropped out of college for $500 a week because it was more money than I'd ever seen.
What year was that?
That was 2014.
Okay.
2014. Dropped out of college for $500 a week. And 1% of the company. And 1%. Now, I had put something, because I had loved media and video and marketing, I put something into the user experience flow when someone was signing up for a new crowdfunding campaign. Do you want help with your video, your photography, your marketing, this, that, or the other? Now, no one ever successfully completed a campaign on our website, but every single person said they wanted help with these things. And so I turned to Mark and I said, I think we actually have an opportunity here. So we started to buy some keywords on Google Ads, like crowdfunding marketing, crowdfunding agency, all of these things. And we actually ended up becoming the second largest company in the world that ran crowdfunding consumer tech campaigns, gadgets, service, apps, you name it. I was thrown into this world as a 22, 23-year-old. All of a sudden, I'm like co-founder of this company that's thriving. I find myself sitting in the boardroom at iRobot in Massachusetts, speaking with Colin Engel and his wife about a new robot that's going to capture lionfish, and we're running his campaign, and he's looking at me for the answers. I'm like, this is cool. But when that money came, no one had ever taught me what to do with it. So I blew it. I blew it on the car. I blew it on the 20-foot ceiling apartment, paintings, vacations, food, credit cards, swipe, swipe, swipe. It didn't matter how much money was coming in. It was going out faster. And I just, anyway, that was company number one. It was a lot of fun.
It's I'm so grateful you told that story, because it's so often, Chris, when we're working and we're doing the right things for the right reasons, or sometimes we're doing the wrong things for the right reasons. It's just wherever we're led, and when the money comes, we aren't good stewards of it. I was homeless at age 27. All of the listeners know that story. I was a millionaire on paper at age 24. I lost it all. I was foolish with it. Then I started a company, and it became very successful. But I got wrapped up in the whole, how I had to appear. Right. So there was the hardtop convertible, there were the Four Seasons vacations, there were all of these things. And I thank God for the suffering, because now in the place that I'm in as co-founder of a successful AI company and overseeing other businesses, I'm such a good steward of every single penny. Like our team, there's myself and 4 guys who co-founded this company. And one of the things I was like, we're going to have the cash flow statement presented every single week. And they're like, every week. And I'm like, yes, every week. And when I advise a startup, one of the first things my business partner and I do is, with that founding team, the cash flow statement is presented every single week. Because if you take your eye off it, whether you're hiring DevOps people or designers or GUI, whoever you're getting, GUI contractors, whatever it is you're doing, if you're not paying attention to it, to your point, you'll lose the investors' money. I want to ask you, there's so many things I could ask you, but just as we're coming to the bottom of the show, you mentioned identity change. And if you could leave the viewers and listeners with your best tips, and let's say someone is watching and they're listening and this is really resonating, and they know they are so out of alignment and they've attached their identity to the wrong things and they find themselves spiraling. So whether it's, eating tubs of Ben and Jerry's at night, or they can't function unless they're microdosing, or they're, whatever it is that they're doing, what are your best tips for someone to go, you know what, Chris, I really resonate with this. I know I need to shift my identity. What tips would you give them?
So I'll continue on from that Tony Robbins story, that pivotal march, that event in Los Angeles that changed everything. Moment of clarity. God spoke to me directly. Later, a couple months later, on June 22nd of 2019, I signed a document called God's Guarantee, where I agreed to give the first 10% of my income. And in Malachi 3:10, God says, bring the whole tithe into my storehouse, that there may be food in my house. Test me in this, says the Lord, and see if I will not throw open the floodgates of heaven and pour out so much blessing that you'll not have room enough to store it. I was told that this was one of the only things I could test God in. I'm like, all right, I'm going to test God. I had pretty much no clear work prospects. I had a couple of clients, but I started this thing where I was talking to an empty room. I wanted to share testimonies and stories and to have others onto a show in order to do that as well. And I just focused on that. I had no idea how it was going to be monetizable or successful or whatever. I knew I had to just get more of these stories out there so that it could help others just like me to face those identity changes. Because, Susan, the part that's really, really, really important is to step out of the isolation, is to tell another human being those things that you think that you uniquely are the only one that's going through. I provided a platform from that. January 1st of 2020, I had the opportunity now to move into a studio, and I do this full time. I produce podcasts for people. I'm able to focus on my podcast completely, and I'm growing a thriving company around that one single activity that when there was no hope, I started giving something, and that's turned into what Salescast is today. And the identity shift happens when you step out of that isolation moment, you step out of that alone moment, share this thing with another human being. I guarantee the exact opposite of what you think will happen will happen. You think they're going to run away from you like you're some sort of dumpster fire. Not true. In fact, it's going to bring you closer together. They're going to say, I had no idea. And you're going to cry and you're going to say, I feel a lot better. And then layer number one goes away. Keep going through those layers and you'll get to the core. And that's the authentic self. When you find the authentic self, everything else changes.
Beautiful. I love that you mentioned tithing. This year, I made a decision. Apparently, we're already best friends. We just met. So this year, I made a decision. I'm not going to tithe my 10%. I'm actually going to tithe at the level of income I want to make this year. And so as opposed to what I was making, which was a huge blessing. So, I knew that I'm not going to test God, I'm going to test myself. And that extra money, what were the things that I didn't really require in my life, right? And so, and as a mom of 5, let me tell you, there are always things I can be spending money on, not things, but education, different things like that. But so I did, and I started this year every single week tithing at the level, and it's just been amazing, Christopher, because whether it's a sales bonus or a new client for our AI company or whatever it is, it's just tremendous. So I love that you shared that, and I'm so grateful you've been here. And Christopher and I would love, whatever it is you're taking away, go ahead, tag us on social. For Chris, it's Christopher Decker on LinkedIn, and you'll find him because you'll just go Christopher Decker, LinkedIn, Age of Authenticity. If you're already following me on LinkedIn, you will see he should be one of my connections. So ideally, and drop a comment if you saw a clip on IG, drop a comment below. If you're again on YouTube, drop a comment. We would love to hear your comments and your shares. So Christopher, thank you so much for everything you are doing in the world. I'm so grateful to now call you my friend, and to all of our listeners all over the world, God bless, go rock your day. And this has been another episode of the Susan Sly Project.
Ladies and gentlemen, this has been another epic episode of the Susan Sly Project. For more tips, strategies, and ideas, visit www.susansly.com.